Hey guys, welcome to ProVax. Don't forget to subscribe for more weekly videos and check us out on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. Hey guys, so I figured it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about the anatomy of viruses because it can be kind of difficult to grasp the concept of how vaccines work if you guys aren't too familiar with how viruses are working in our body and how they are formed. So this is just a generic virus, no one in particular. I can go into more detail on different viruses. If you guys want to let me know which ones, I can do a separate video on different viruses and their specific structures. If that's something that interests you, let me know on Twitter or on Facebook, or message me or email me or leave it in a comment, and I'll look at those and I'll consider those for future videos. So when you're looking at the structure of a virus, there's two main components that make up a virus. First is the genetic material, highlighted here in blue, and then the second component is the protein coat. The protein coat surrounds the genetic material and is what encapsulates it. So for the genetic material of a virus, there are 4 different options that you can have. First one is single-stranded DNA. What that means is that the genetic material of this virus is encoded in one single strand of DNA. The second one is double-stranded DNA. Double-stranded DNA is virtually identical to our own DNA. It's the common double helix form that you see. Single-stranded RNA is one strand of RNA. It's very similar to mRNA found in our own cells. And then you have double-stranded RNA, which is 2 pieces of RNA that form the genetic material. It's also worth noting that there are some viruses that do have a segmented genome, kind of like how in humans we have chromosomes that house our genetic information. That's kind of the idea that happens in some viruses. A very common example of this is the flu virus. Now, as for the protein coat is just that. It's proteins that are encoded by the DNA or RNA of the genetic material of the virus, and those proteins encapsulate it and protect it from the environment until it's able to enter our own cells. Okay, so a little bit on the binding of a virus into our cells. One of the things to keep in mind is that a virus binds a very specific type of cell. So for example, a virus that binds a liver cell is not necessarily going to bind something like a lung cell, because those 2 cells have different receptors on their surfaces. So what that means is that if you take a normal human cell, there are certain receptors on its surface that are all different and therefore require different viral receptors to bind it. So if you take this virus right here and you want it to bind this cell, you need to either have a receptor that binds this, or any combination of the 3. So if you take your virus and if you give the virus a receptor such as that does not fit any of these, so this virus will not be able to bind this cell. But if you give this virus, say something like this, then this receptor can easily bind here on the cell. And once this virus is able to bind it sort of in a lock and key type of fashion, the viral envelope will then open and the genetic material of the virus, be it DNA or RNA, will then enter the human cell, and that's how the virus is able to replicate inside of the host cell. So the interesting thing about viruses having different receptors that bind different cells is that's kind of how our immune system also works. So when our immune system encounters a virus, it'll look for different things on its surface. So it'll look for a receptor that looks like this and realize this receptor is a receptor of a virus. So it'll start creating antibodies against this receptor. So then this is where the human antibody comes in, and it comes along and it binds this specific antigen that's on the surface of the virus. The antibody doesn't bind the whole virus, rather it binds this specific antigen. So if you think back to our talk on subunit vaccines, they utilize this principle. And what they do is, rather than injecting the whole virus into a person through a vaccine, instead they'll break apart the virus and look for these types of antigens on the surface of the virus. And by taking those specific antigens and putting them into the vaccine and injecting that into the person, the human immune system will then create antibodies that will target specifically that antigen. As we also talked about with subunit vaccines, by not utilizing the whole virus, you do one of two things. First of all, it's impossible to get sick from this vaccine because you are not giving the full virus. There is no genetic material being injected into the person that could cause the virus to even replicate. Secondly, by injecting only the antigen, you're only injecting a few proteins versus all of the proteins that make up the capsule of the virus. So by doing so, you allow the immune system to recognize the antigen and create immunity against the antigen. That way, in the future, let's say you get exposed to the whole virus. The whole virus, remember, has this antigen on its surface already. So your immune system's memory cells will recognize the antigen and start mass producing these antibodies, which will then bind onto the antigen and neutralize the virus. This then allows your body to rid itself of the virus. This is why it's so important that we get our vaccines, because rather than allowing our immune system to come in contact with the full, potentially deadly and dangerous virus, you're only exposing your immune system to the key portions that it needs. That way it can learn and create antibodies against the antigen. That way in the future, you're not at that much of a risk against the virus because your body has already learned how to deal with it. So with that, we'll conclude this video on the basic anatomy and how a virus binds to the human cells. Thank you for watching. If you guys have any questions, leave them down below in the comments section. Leave a like if you guys liked the video. Let me know if I should do future videos on different types of viruses and go more in depth onto their anatomy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll check you guys out in the next one. Thank you.